Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Intro to Databases. In this video, we're going to learn how to create and destroy databases and also create and destroy tables. Now, databases themselves are not that complicated to create and destroy. There isn't really a whole lot you can do in the statements. So I'm going to show you the two basic statements and explain what they are. And you can explore this page here if you want to learn further. As you can see, there isn't a whole lot to learn about specifically altering and creating databases because most of the structure in a database is done with the table schemes. Okay, so let me show you. So as you saw last time, we had databases. We had our we had our COM database. So as you saw before, you could create database and then give it some name of some sort, like COM or COM2. The other option is, let's just say you have a database and it's all terrible, you aren't happy with it, you want to remove it. Then you can say drop database, and then in this case we're going to drop the COM database. You'll see show. Well, you can just use up arrow. Show databases. It's gone. So let's create it again. Base intro to databases. We'll create an actual one we're going to use here, and then also every time you make a statement in SQL, you want to end it with a semicolon. And yes, you can do multiple statements. You could do databases show databases like so. No, I'm pretty sure you can. Well, anyway. Oh, I missed the first one. Databases. There we go. You'll see we did this with a semicolon, and it did the database statement. It did the query twice. So you can do multiple statements. Okay. So basically, you can create databases and destroy databases. So now we're going to use that database. So MySQL knows what database to do the queries on. Okay. Show tables, and you'll see this is an empty database. Okay, there's nothing in it. So let's talk about the create table definitions, because that's kind of the meat of MySQL in general. Tables are pretty much where you handle all your structure. There are MySQL global variables and ways you can handle data, but basically tables define most of what you're going to be doing in MySQL. So let's remove this page here and go to the create table page. Now this is a pretty good reference page, though I thought when I first got into databases that it was a little bit complex for just a user when they first see it. There's a lot of information here, and it's kind of complex and hard to tell what's going on. At least that was my first impression. So hopefully after this video here, this page will make a lot more sense to you. Okay, so basically with a table, you want to tell MySQL what you're doing. So you're saying create. That's what you're doing. The method it's looking for. And then you're going to say I'm going to create a table, and because you said use intro to databases up here, it's going to know to put this table into this database. Okay. And then you want your name of your table, and then the definition of that table, and then some options. Now we're going to avoid the options initially, but we'll get into them in a little bit. So we're going to mainly focus on the definition at first. Okay, so we're going to create, let's stick with the users because users can be kind of complex. And then you want to surround in parentheses the definition of that users table. Now spaces in this case don't matter, so you can put a space there or not, it depends. Some people like to make one statement, hit enter, and keep going down and creating their database, their table, excuse me. But I like to separate it out like this and develop it like this. Okay, in a production environment, I like to use migration files, but in this instance, we're going to do it directly from the command line because migration files only fill certain roles in certain framework situations. Okay, not every framework is going to have migration files. Maybe you're not working with migration files. Maybe you've never heard of migration files. So let's do everything here where everyone can use this for every situation. Okay, so some of the options you can do in creating a table is a temporary table. That's useful for altering data. Remember, when you close the session, the temporary table goes away. So if you want to store data long term, you don't want to create a temporary table. And also you can have this statement if not exists, and that's important for migration files and any files that run automatically. So that way, if it won't attempt to run the statement if the table already exists. And then there's your table name again and your definition. Okay, So Databases hold data, right? So you want to define what the data looks like, because programmatically, numbers look different than characters. So and obviously there's a lot more complication than that, but that's kind of the basic idea. So basically with MySQL, you can control what the data type is and kind of how much memory to use for that data type. Because for very, 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 very large databases, you want to be very careful and not have a lot of empty data. So for example, if you usernames, you're storing the first name and you allow 10,000 characters for the first name, I don't think there's any person in the world who has a first name with 10,000 characters. So because of that, you're wasting a lot of extra space. But if you know that all your users for the most part only have 12 characters, or you limit to 12 characters, then you can really control how much memory and hard drive space your database is using. So it's kind of the point of the length here. So we have different types. So if you're really knowledgeable on, or will have some experience with programming, some of these will look pretty familiar. At least integer will, float, double, float, these sort of things. Decimal might not, depending on what languages you've used before. Dates, times, character, varchar, these sort of things. Varchar treat sort of like a string, C string class. Excuse me. Blob, tiny text. These are for very, very, very large data sets. You can kind of look at this list here and get an idea of what data types you can use. Okay. And then there's the different options for each data type here. So let me give you a real world example so you can kind of see here. So let's create the table we used before, the users, and let's just create a first name. Okay. So the very first thing you put in the series of commas for each field in a table is the name of that table. So this can be pretty much anything. I'm pretty sure you can't use special characters as the starting character. It has to be a number or a letter. I believe uppercases are okay as well. For definitive answers on those questions, just come over into this definition page here, and it'll give you definitions, or you can just try it. Okay, so first is the name, and then we're going to say the type. So in this case, we're going to use a varchar because it's a string of different length. So we'll say varchar, and like before we did 60. Okay, so now you can kind of see what's going on there, why we did that varchar 60. We're determining the type and the length. Okay, and then you can give different types of options. So like for example, if you wait, that's not right. Where's the options at? Where I missed that? Hold on a second. Primary key. So you can make things like a primary key. There's different options you can use. For some reason, I'm having a hard time finding it. But I'll go over all the options you can use for different options for fields. Okay. So once again, also every table needs to have, it doesn't need to, but most cases, unless it's a many-to-many relationship, you want to have an auto-incrementing ID. So ID, integer, primary key, auto-increment, and not null. Some of the options are here. So see, actually, we can, also all these data types have default values. So integer default value is 11, so you don't have to define that. And this length here is the length that's shown when you query. It will still store an integer as an integer regardless, but this is the length that's shown. It's kind of I think a common mistake that I've made before too. And I think earlier in this video I actually made that mistake. And what I said, this number is what's shown on the select, not what's stored in memory. Okay, so those guys who knew that and were screaming at me earlier. Okay, so all right. So now we have a basic users table, right? And you're telling the database that you want a primary key and auto increment and not null. You can say things like unique, like if you say this is a unique, and someone tries to enter in, let's say like earlier we entered Mike Smith. If someone tries to enter in Mike again, the database will bark back and say, no, you can't enter in Mike. There's already a Mike somewhere in this table. So there's different. You can see it can be pretty useful for structuring your database. Okay. All right. So we'll do that again. Okay. And then, I didn't add a last name or an email and a password. Oh no, how do I do that? Well, we've already learned how to create, but how do you alter a table? And that's with the alter statement. Okay, so we'll say in MySQL, alter table. It's late at night. So alter table. And this allows you to add columns, remove columns, alter columns. Okay. So in this case, we forgot a few columns. So we'll say alter table users, add column. Let's see, we'll do a last varchar 60. Okay, so we'll explain the users table, and now we'll see that the last got added. So the alters table allows you to alter the structure of an already existing table. Okay, and this definition you can see here tells you kind of all the options you can do. It's really, really complex. There's so many things you can do. I don't think 10 videos would be enough to explain all the things you can do with the alter statement, but that's how you alter a table. So if you need to add a column, remove a column, change the definition of a column, everything you need is with this alter statement. Okay, so now we can create a database, we can remove a database, we can create a table, we can remove a table, and we can alter a table. And with that, I think I'm going to close out this video. If you have any questions, please post below. I'm usually available somewhat every day, and I can answer your question pretty quickly. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, please hit the like button. Thanks. See you guys in the next video.